Hi there. Welcome everybody to the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall, a CPA with Dominion. We're a firm that specializes in tax advisory and compliance for financial advisors and wealth managers, RIAs. Today's guest is John Jones. He's the president of Scissortail Executive Advisors, which is a firm dedicated to helping corporations optimize their 401k plans. John also has experience working with financial advisors for their business owner clients who are jumping through the same hurdles, trying to figure out how to implement and correctly deploy 401k plans into their businesses. So thank you for joining me today, John. This is always a fun topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
So we have today's segment, we're going to do a pretty basic overview of what's involved with the general plan, process, systems of getting 401k set up, maybe when it's the right time to start that. I think from the advisor's perspective, something that's probably top of mind is, okay, I have a business owner, they're growing and scaling their business. Maybe early on they didn't have key employees and they're starting to have more key employees. They want to start offering more benefits. Maybe they're doing, SEPs or simple plans or things like that, but really the powerhouse is the 401k. When do you think it's time for them to start thinking about having that conversation with their clients? What have you seen as typical size or use cases where it makes sense to start that conversation for a business owner client?
Yeah, I think once you start getting into the double digits number of employee count, it's a time to start having that. With startup plans, there are certain ways you want to definitely set them up so that you can have them for the long term, and especially if you can see that business is a business that's going to scale over time. You want to make sure and set that up on the front end correctly with all the testing requirements and some of those things. But I think as the employee count starts getting to that double digits, as you said, there's some key employees. You might want to do a match on the plan. I think that's when you really want to start looking at implementing an actual 401k plan.
Yeah, because I've seen on our side with some advisors that have done this internally for themselves, they've done it at a much smaller scale, but the amount of frustration with the paperwork and things moving forward and the 550s and all of the regulation that comes in with doing that has been a real challenge for them. So for people where they've decided, okay, it's time for us to do this, it makes sense. Could you talk a little bit about some of the benefits that these businesses see from making that switch, and just when you're weighing the cost benefit analysis of is now the right time, things that they should be thinking about in that conversation?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few benefits. I think from the employee standpoint, retention and recruiting are big points, topics. Everyone, especially nowadays in the job market, is looking, how do I retain some of these key employees? How do I recruit? You can do that with a 401k plan, especially if you're going to offer a match on the plan. There are some Secure Act things that are great for cost analysis. I'll let you dive into that a little bit more if you wanted to, with some of the credits that you can do for startup plans, that as well. And really, I think the overall benefit comes from the recruiting and retaining side, as I mentioned. On the actual setting up of the plan, there are some key things when looking at setting up a plan, because as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you want to set it up correctly from the front end so that you're not dealing with testing issues and top heavy issues and all of those from the beginning. So little things like a match and certain key or a profit share on the plan can definitely enhance participation in the plan. Having an advisor that does education, those key little areas are big when starting a plan.
Yeah. And so for somebody who wants to do this, what are the key professionals that they need to get connected with in order to execute something like this?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple. I would look at local TPAs, third-party administrators. There's two ways you can set up a 401k plan. Mainly, you can have it bundled or unbundled. Bundled means that the record keeper is going to do all of the testing compliance work. Unbundled usually means there's a TPA on the plan. I think having a knowledgeable TPA in your corner is huge. I think also just reaching out to the actual record keepers. So all the record keepers have wholesalers, your Fidelities, Empowers, Transamerica. I think picking their brains as well, saying, hey, this is a space I'm looking to get into. Where do I start? What's good prospecting? What's a good size plan? I've assembled a team of plenty of TPAs and record keepers because at the end of the day, sometimes complex plans do pop up, even on startups, that you need to have somebody to piggyback off of or pick their brain on, because at the end of the day, they're seeing these plans day in and day out. So definitely a good TPA and a couple good record keepers in your corner is a big part of it.
All right. So that sounds like an offer for if people want another resource here to send you a message.
Yeah.
So when people do implement these, what are the common things that you see go wrong?
Yeah, I think on the implementation process from a startup, it really is making sure that the education is there. Because if not, and you have a bunch of, there's a highly compensated versus non-highly compensated. If you've got a lot of the highly compensated contributing at a high number where the non-highly aren't, you're going to fail every test. There's going to be refunds. People are going to be upset with it. They thought they were saving. Now they've got to claim this on their taxes. I think if you can, as a business owner, having a match on the plan is huge. I mean, if you look at the statistics, employees are going to try to get to what that match is. So as a highly compensated employer, if you're trying to retain and recruit a couple highly compensated. I think having a match on the plan is big. And I think just overall process on the plan, making sure that if you're an advisor getting into the space that you do have somewhat of a process, because there are a lot of things from the initial startup that you have to do and set up, whether you're starting a plan or taking over a plan. But once you've got the process in place, it really can flow with itself. You, of course, got to manage the investments and the fiduciary oversight and all of that. But having a process from the front end is huge.
That's good to know. And so for people that are, so say you have a business owner client who's going into this, they get in touch with you, or they get in the right resources to do some of those administrative pieces to get things established. What kind of additional tools are they going to need to participate in this? Is this something that they can do, or do you really recommend people, unless you're really going to specialize in this, finding a completely outsourced solution for what's happening with the 401k plan? Or how have you seen people take advantage of using this as a planning technique for your client, but then also like folding it back into your business as an advisor, in a way that makes sense? Like, what have you seen people do for arrangements?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's two answers to that. I think you have a sleeve of advisors who might just have 1, 2, 3 one-off plans. I think the way they approach it, versus somebody's like, hey, I want to dive into this space, are two separate answers, and I'll hit on both of them. I think if you're an advisor who knows, hey, I've got a couple of business owners, I've got connections with the COOs, CFOs on some of these plans. I think some of the initial questions are to get into, just say, hey, when's the last time you had somebody actually review the plan? A lot of times they'll be like, and give you that kind of blank stare. And then, okay, this plan, either if there's an advisor on it, they're not doing what they should be doing. But I think having a outsourced team in your corner is good there. The TPAs, the record keepers, you really can lean on them quite a bit when starting a plan or getting into the space. I think if you're going to go into this and say, hey, I want this to be an actual revenue stream in my book of business, I see the value in it. That's when I would start looking at a couple of different systems. You've got tools out there like FI360, RPEG, that are a little bit more advanced. I use RPEG personally. It runs my whole 401k practice, from investment analysis, fiduciary oversight, fiduciary management, education. I mean, you name all the 10 factors you need on the 401k plan, and it runs it for me. So really, it depends how you want to get into this space. I think it's a great space to get into, because what's nice is, as well as, if you're in financial planning and you write up 2 or 3 401k plans, that have 100 employees in them, there's 100 other warm leads that you get to help, that they might need needs, whether that's insurance, private wealth, whatever your specialty is, it flows right into it. So it really just depends on how dedicated you want to be to the 401k space, quote unquote.
So if somebody's interested in diving into this, where would you say is the best place to start in terms of self-education, picking up the right tools, those sorts of things, if this is an interest for them?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff online. There's a couple of different either webinars and I keep going back to this, but the record keepers put out a lot of stuff. I would go to your Fidelities, Empowers. Every region has a wholesaler and say, hey, Catherine, this is something I want to dive into. Can you send me just some initial resources as a new advisor? They have a ton of resources on that. There's a couple big organizations like NAPA. NAPA is a huge one that really focuses on the 401k space. They have a lot of white papers. And then I would also try to find local advisors in your area that do the 401k space. That's how I learned. I stumbled upon, I started my career at Merrill Lynch and got under a guy who had, a couple $100 million in 401k space, and just really picked his brain and dove into it. So there are a lot of good resources out there. That's probably where I would start.
Yeah, that's great. So when you see people wanting to approach doing these and, working with clients on them, like, are there other areas that you've seen advisors kind of fall short, or, specifically on the process side? Because I know you said, in a previous answer that, it's all about process. Like, where have you seen things kind of fall apart, or common issues that you encounter, like on the process side of actually executing?
Yeah, I think on the process is people do a lot of the work on the front end and don't really do the middle or back end work. And what I mean by that is they'll either take over a plan by broker of record or start a plan. And, the investments that you have in a plan that has 500K versus the investments in a plan that has 2.5, 3 million should be probably a completely different lineup, as well as the fees. Not too many of the record keepers are going to come knocking on your client's door saying, oh, great, you got a fee break. You have to do a lot of that negotiation on your end. And then same thing on the fiduciary side of things. As you know, there's a ton of new regulations. There are new laws that come out. It seems like daily, but with a lot of the Secure Act stuff. But just staying on top of that, I think you do have to be diligent and put some time to it. Where I see a lot of people misalign with their processes, they kind of set it and forget it. When there are some moving parts, there's some things you can put in your process to help that and outsource and outline some of it. But the process really is the biggest part of this once you get the initial knowledge and gain that.
Nice. That's great. Well, I guess as we're wrapping up the conversation, for people who are looking for more resources or to find out kind of what you work with advisors, could you speak to that a little bit of how you work with people and what the process looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to work with advisors on my side. The 401k is all I do. I don't do any private wealth, insurance, planning. So I'm happy to do field work. I'm also happy just to jump on a phone call with any of your listeners and let them pick my brain on what I've learned. Like I said, I've been in the 401k world for 7 years. It feels like 20 with how it's changed. But I think that's the biggest thing is saying, hey, let's look at who some prospects you have, or maybe some business owners. There's some tools you can go look at 5500s. Those are all public information, and say, hey, here's maybe 1 or 2 talking points that you can have with this business owner. Like I said, the number one question that I ask business owners or executives is truly so simple: is when's the last time you had this reviewed? A lot of the times they're going to just stare at you or say, oh, I think, somebody came out here 2-3 years ago, and that just gets you in the door to start the initial conversation. So when it comes to the field work side of it, I'm happy to either look at a prospect with any of the listeners, let them pick my brain, or send them the resources that I go through to run my practice as well.
Yeah, that's great. And where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, either LinkedIn, and I think you have my LinkedIn, or just shoot me an email at john.jones@scissortailea.com. Happy to jump on a Zoom or a phone call. LinkedIn might be a little harder because I've got a very generic first and last name with John Jones, but hopefully you can post that and send that out if anyone's interested as well.
There might be some other John Joneses getting some interesting 401k emails. Yeah. No, we'll post wherever this is posted. It'll be nearby. But so this was a really great intro conversation on what people should be thinking about when they're seeing clients kind of transition up into that size where 401k plans become an issue, and how you can take the lead as the advisor with helping get them the right resources to take advantage of that. We didn't even get into, there's a bunch of great tax credits that are out right now for companies that are doing these. So that's definitely a consideration as well, of you being able to be the forefront to bring this as a planning idea to them, and help them deploy some of these plans. Because especially for the business owners, if they're able to participate in these plans too, there can be a lot of tax deferral and tax savings for them by doing that. So it's always a great topic. But thank you so much for coming on the show today, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, and thank you so much.